Chapter 5. Lecture. Religion.
The subject of today's lecture is religion, and religion in the United States is a complicated topic that is often misunderstood by people from other parts of the world. One reason for this may be that people in other countries are often only exposed to American culture through television, films, and videos on the internet. These are media that, in general, ignore the role and importance of religion in the United States. If international visitors took a drive through small towns in the United States, they might be surprised by the number of different churches in even a small town of 2,000 or 3,000 people. These churches generally represent the two major Christian traditions, Catholic and Protestant, but often include several different Protestant denominations. Larger towns and big cities will also have other places of worship, including synagogues, mosques, and temples representing other religious traditions. When you consider that people from many different countries and religious backgrounds immigrated to the United States, it probably shouldn't be surprising to find a great number of different religions in the States. That brings me to what I want to talk about today. First, I'd like to give you some facts and figures about various religious groups in the United States. Second, I'll compare the United States to other modernized Western nations. Third, I'll discuss the importance of religion, particularly about the increasing role of religion in U.S. political life in recent years. And finally, I'll talk about the increasing diversity of religion in the United States. Let's start today with facts and figures. Estimating the number of people belonging to various religious groups in the States can be difficult. First of all, the U.S. government cannot ask for information on religious affiliation in any official capacity, for example, on the census. Statistical information must be gathered from surveys of the population done by non-governmental agencies, or from organizational reports from religious groups themselves on how many members they have. One major survey conducted in 2007 reported that about 78% of Americans identified themselves as Christian, with about 51% of these identifying themselves as Protestant and about 24% as Catholic. The same survey reported that 1.7% identified themselves as Jewish, 0.7% as Buddhist, 0.6% as Muslim, and 0.4% as Hindu. Another major survey done in 2008 found fairly similar results. However, they also reported results that indicated that the U.S. population had been continuing to become less religious over the last few decades. Let me just say that not everyone agrees with this conclusion. Some people believe that many Americans, especially young people, are turning away from religious institutions, not from religion itself. Now let's look at the two major ways that religion in the United States differs from religion in other modernized Western nations. The first way involves the importance of religion in people's lives and their attendance at their places of worship. A 2009 Gallup poll asked, "Is religion an important part of your life?" While 65% of Americans said yes, only 27% of Britons, 30% of the French and 40% of Germans said yes. And in terms of church attendance, Gallup reported that 41% of Americans, 15% of the French, and 10% of Britons reported that they regularly attended church or another place of worship. Most writers and scholars agree that Europeans are generally more secular than Americans. They may believe in God, but they tend to stay away from religious institutions, except for certain formal occasions, like weddings, baptisms, and funerals, and a few very important religious days. The second difference is that in many modernized European nations, there is no clear separation of religion and government. When discussing religion in America, it's important to remember that freedom of worship is guaranteed by the First Amendment to the Constitution, which also establishes the separation of church and state. So, this amendment guarantees everyone the right to practice his or her religion, but it also says that religion should not have a place in the public sphere. For example, it should not be part of anything concerning the government or public schools. Of course, religious beliefs and values have always influenced politics and education in the United States, but generally, they influence these areas in an indirect way. To sum up, then, the importance of religion and belonging to a church or religious organization seem greater to Americans than to Europeans. At the same time, however, religion has no official role in the U.S. government, and it has largely been confined to people's private lives. Recently, however, there has been a trend toward an increase in the influence of religion in politics. Let's take a closer look at this rather sudden rise in the influence of religion on American political life. Although religion in America seemed to be in decline during most of the last century, in the 1970s there was a religious revival that surprised many people. This religious revival became known as the rise of the religious right. In other words, the people involved in this religious revival were politically conservative. For a while, it seemed that this conservative trend would not influence politics or the legal system. Although the religious right was generally opposed to abortion, abortion was made legal by the Supreme Court. And although the religious right generally favored prayer in schools, the Supreme Court found that prayer in public schools was unconstitutional. The issues of abortion and prayer were felt by many to be matters of private concern, not serious political issues. However, these issues have become increasingly politicized recently, and because they are highly controversial issues, they have tended to divide people very sharply. Finally, I'd like to briefly focus on religious diversity in the states. There have always been religious minorities in the states, but since immigration quotas by national origins were eliminated in 1965, more immigrants have been coming from parts of the world with many religious traditions rarely seen in the states previously. Diana Eck, a professor at Harvard, runs a project which studies pluralism. Her research looks at the issues of a population that has become diverse because of historical events, such as immigration. Her interest in pluralism began when she was doing research in the multi-religious nation of India, where she met Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, Jews, Jains, Zoroastrians, and Buddhists. Later, she became aware of how her Harvard classes, over the years, had increasing numbers of American-born students of Indian origin. This started her thinking about and researching how the religious traditions of Indian Americans influence American society, and how these traditions may have changed because of America's influence on them. As part of her research, she found an amazing diversity of small religious communities, first in Boston and then nationwide. I don't have time today to go more deeply into her research and findings, but the title of her book, published in 2002, says a lot. The title is A New Religious America: How a Christian Country has become the world's most religiously diverse nation. Because religious values have always been important in the United States in one way or another, it seems likely that religion will continue to play an important role in the country well into the future. I've already mentioned the role of the religious right. However, we cannot know how much this group will be able to influence political life in the future. And, of course, we can't know how significant religious diversity will be in the future of American society.